Are you unknowingly perpetuating a culture of toxic positivity? And if you are, what are those consequences for you and your organisation? And importantly, what are some steps and some strategies, one, to prevent it, and two, if you realise through this conversation that you've got one and that you're perpetuating it, what you can do to radically and quickly transform and change a toxic positive culture. Hi, I'm Michelle Duval. I'm the founder and the CEO of Fingerprint for Success. Welcome to our YouTube channel. We're diving in on and deconstructing this whole concept of toxic positivity. Now, what is it? It sounds like a bit of a buzzword and it's a little bit hard to say. I keep stumbling on it. I think I've had to say and take this 20 times to be able to say toxic positivity. But if you bear with me, if I stumble, toxic positivity is where we do two key things. One is we deny reality, and two, we are delusional and we construct and distort reality to fit our narrative, to fit our agenda. Now, why is this so impactful on a culture, and why isn't just positivity a really great and good thing? Now, positivity is when we are more optimistic than we're pessimistic. It means that we look for the glass to be half full rather than half empty. Positivity is harmless. It helps people to feel good. It helps people to create new realities. It helps to orientate people towards goals. When it turns toxic, it does something far worse. It creates an environment where things fester, where genuine harm can happen to human beings. And importantly, it creates an environment where it's not possible for anything to grow. It creates an environment where companies start to rot. Now, the consequences, therefore, can be dire on humans, the great people working in our teams, but also on the big grand visions and goals that we might have for a company. Two of the greatest examples, I think, in the last 2 years in the world is, of course, Uber and WeWork. Both founded by evangelistic founders who have a vision of a new normal, a new reality for transportation and the way that people actually work. And with that vision and with that passion and that experience that they have of taking people on the journey, they were able to raise millions of dollars, hire incredible workspaces, and importantly, capture the hearts and minds of individuals to get behind that grand vision. The third notorious example in the world is, of course, the very sad story and the dismal story of Theranos. Theranos, with Elizabeth, set out to be able to create the world's first home blood tests. And of course, as those of you who followed the story know, Elizabeth told the world that they had already had the test in place when she knew full well that the test didn't exist. So as you can see with these three different founders, they were able to evangelize, raise money, get people behind them. But at some point, that positivity and optimism went too far and it became toxic. What is that point, that threshold where it becomes toxic? It becomes toxic when those two things are happening. When you're denying the feedback, the reality, the reports, and failing to seek it. And the third one is when you actually distort it and turn it into something else in the case of Elizabeth. Now, we know that the great reality distortion tunnel or framework, of course, is Steve Jobs. It was how he powered the revolution of what he did with Apple. And that was where he stayed true to a vision that he had. But here's the distinction. He had stayed true to the vision and what was possible, but he wasn't denying the reality of where things were. He was not Elizabeth lying about what was possible and what was actually happening. And importantly, he was not avoiding the feedback and the input that was coming around him. The distinction here is the denial and the distortion. Here's an example of denial. Have you ever caught yourself or heard somebody else say, this is going to be a very personal example, and it might be confronting and upsetting for some of you listening to this part of our conversation. When someone says to you, I've lost my baby, here are some of the toxic positive responses that regularly come to a couple who have lost their baby. First one could be, oh, isn't it lucky that you've already had a child? Second one could be, oh, don't worry, you'll be able to have another one. The third one might be, oh, don't worry, one day you'll get over it. Now, to any grieving parent, those three comments are wonderful examples of toxic positivity. You are denying those parents' experience of the fact of their loss. You are distorting reality in a way that means their experience is not acknowledged, and you're asking them to step into another state without the process of the healing that would take them to that state. Now, a workplace example might be, I'm really scared and nervous that I'm about to get fired. I know there's lots of redundancies and layoffs happening, and I really think that next week I'm going to lose my job. Now, the toxic positive response would be, oh, you should really think positively. Oh, look, you should just focus on the best. Now, if that person is the sole breadwinner in their family and they are going to lose their income, asking them to step into a new reality again denies their experience and actually distorts what's going on without them going on the journey to get to the point of the positive. So as you can see from these two examples, the denial and distortion comes from you as the individual who has the toxic positivity for one key reason. And what we refer to in the cognitive sciences is we call this low ego strength. Ego strength is the ability for your self-identity to be able to deal with reality as it is without having to deny it, without having to distort it. You can just be what it is. And we call that the ability to accept something. I don't like it, condone it, or want it, but I can accept the reality. I can be with it in myself, and I can be with it in others. Those of you who can't offer empathy to the other without asking them and forcing them to change their reality is an indicator that you have the low ego strength. It means that you can't be with that reality, so you want to protect them from it, seemingly, or you want to avoid that experience for yourself for the fear at a deep unconscious level that you could fall apart if you were to deal with it, or that the other person could fall apart. So healthy positivity would be to respond to the couple, and the right answer is, I'm so sorry for your loss. For the employee who's fearful that they're going to lose their job, would be, wow, I can only imagine how concerning that might be. Would you like to spend some time to work through some contingency plans if you were to lose your job? So we're investing with meeting the person where they are and being able to be with reality without needing to distort it. Now, in a workplace like a WeWork, like an Uber, like a Theranos, you can see how these myths can get perpetuated. The key reasons they get perpetuated is because the leaders are not asking or seeking for feedback. Feedback could come at the end of a meeting. I love what Mark Rowland does. At the very end of one of his meetings, he will ask you what went well in that meeting, or what could I do better? No fear of what they're going to hear. That's an example of immediate feedback. Another example of feedback is doing what we might call a culture survey. There's wonderful tools, and the distinction here is using a survey that's anonymous and that you cannot control the data, that an external third party is controlling the anonymity. See, I can't say the words. A great example of that is Culture Amp, where you can take a survey of your team, find out exactly their sentiment, how are they feeling, and here's the key important thing. Reporting back and sharing the reality of the results with your team without doctoring them, which means distorting them, without denying that that's occurring, given that that's your team's experience, and embracing where your team are at, and then working with your team constructively and positively to be able to create a new normal that's better than the one that you're in. But here's the distinction. You're working through the steps, and you're positive that it's possible to change and make a better reality, but you're not denying or distorting the current reality. If you do, toxic positivity. Another great example of is hiring internal coaches. So an awesome thing to do is to be able to build an internal coaching culture, embed internal culture of coaches. A great example of that is Canva, a high growth venture with over 1,200 people, and they have internal coaches where team members can go and work with a coach, work through challenges, work towards goals, but a place for people to deal with their reality. Another great example is something that Atlassian does, another high growth venture, which is to have HR, so human resource, business partners inside of each team, which is a designated person where people can go to be able to actually talk about the realities of what people are experiencing. And here's what's important, having those people in those roles and then surfacing the feedback to the leadership group, and the leadership group embracing the reality with a positive focus on what do we need to change to build the ideal culture and environment to meet our goals and our visions. We're positive about the goals and our visions, but we don't deny or distort where we are today. So as you can see, there are a number of different mechanisms that help you as a leader or as a team member to, one, check to what degree are you denying, distorting other people's realities because you can't handle it. Two, what mechanisms in place do you have to be able to get a good gist of the current reality? And once you get the current reality, what do you do with it? Now, the consequences of current realities and so on at Uber led to complete denial as those letters came out in the blogs, in the investigation for Uber around the sexual harassment. Is one individual team member had reached out to human resources over and over again, and that feedback about the sexual harassment that was going on in the organisation was ignored. This is toxic positivity. Our culture's great. There are no problems. No one knows about it. And of course, the poor individual had to become a whistleblower. And as a result of that, the company culture was revealed to be full of harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, and multiple other factors, which is a great example, sadly, of toxic positivity. Now, in a culture that is positive, they'll have a vision of how they want the company to be. They would take the first signs of those feedback and investigate them. The company would be discussing them and putting action plans in place to make sure that they were dealing with the current reality. Now, as a professional coach, toxic positivity, sadly and unfortunately, is a very, very common thing that we're working with individuals in their family context, but also at work. I think one of the biggest perpetuators of this toxic positivity has actually been the work of a book called The Secret. No doubt most of you have heard about it. The Secret is a self-help book which talks about the possibility of being able to create your own future. And the idea behind this premise and this philosophy is that if you create a vision and you emotionally connect to it, you're going to be able to create anything that you want to create in your life, but that it's super important that you stay positive to be able to do that. Now, in working with thousands and thousands and thousands of people's goals and creating models to help people to achieve extraordinary things in the world, it's absolutely true that we must stay positive and focused on the vision, the goal, the destination, where we want to go. Where it becomes toxic is if you deny your current steps of where you are on the journey. Because here's the thing, the body has an incredible feedback mechanism. If you pretend that you are where you are right now and you're actually at the destination, your body and yourself has no reason or motivation to actually get to the destination. The dissonance, the cognitive dissonance of being able to be with reality, know where you are, creates the energy, it creates the motivation to actually get you to the goal, to overcome the challenges, the realities, the steps and the stages. As we know, all the greatest things that have ever happened in the world didn't happen just by thinking them. Lots of experimentation, lots of failure, lots of challenges. And the greatest leaders are the ones who create a positive, healthy environment that says it's possible to be with reality, with whatever you're experiencing, embracing it, picking everybody up on the journey and taking the steps to be able to positively achieve the outcome. Love to hear some of your stories about toxic positivity, what the impact has been, what your key learnings are, and what you're taking away from this conversation. The distinction here, of course, is about your ego strength. So it comes back to how comfortable are you to be able to be with reality. And when you're comfortable to be able to be with reality, you can be with other people's reality. You can offer them empathy, acknowledgement, understanding. Do not be afraid that you're going to end up stuck in that consequence of where they are. As soon as we embrace and accept where we are and when others are, an incredible things happens. Possibility of new outcomes and new experiences becomes possible. But it can't if we don't meet people where they are. Leave your comments, leave your questions. Looking forward to hearing your experiences. That's it. Bye for now.